Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual But Not Religious Show. This is George Lewis. I'm your host for the evening. I've got a great guest here tonight. I have Jessica Taylor, who has written a book called From Tragedy to Triumph, Journey Back from the Edge. It's a great book. We thought we weren't going to be able to broadcast tonight. We had a feedback loop going on, but we quickly got it fixed, and we're going to be able to go ahead with the show. Tom is going to send out some messages on Facebook and Twitter to bring you back in case you missed it. And if you did, I guarantee you that you're going to want to see this show in the archived version. So be sure and come back and see the show. This is Jessica's book. This is her second book. Jessica was scheduling or in the process of getting scheduled to go on the Oprah show, and I guess Oprah decided that there were greener pastures and bigger and better for her in store for her, and so she stopped. And unfortunately, Jessica just did not get that opportunity, but she may here in the future. Now, my next week's guests are Mike O'Hare and Alfredo Pretorius. They wrote a book called The Meadow, and this is a really interesting novel about two people who have this love story go on that spans actually centuries, various lifetimes. That's interesting enough, but as interesting, these two folks co-authored the book with an ocean apart. They both live on separate continents. They became fast friends in the process. They're going to be a real interesting guest, so do tune in again next week. Tom, with that, I think we're ready for Jessica. All right, I got her.
Volume on the phone or the volume on the...
Turn the volume on your computer down if you would, Jessica. Hi there.
I gotta reset. Yeah, I put it down.
Okay, and you need your phone?
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
I can. How are you?
Yeah, nice to meet you 20 minutes later.
I'm telling you, it's been one of those kind of nights. Well, that's one of the big issues when you have the technology that we have and you're live. You can take some pretty deep breaths sometimes, I'll tell you. But I didn't want to lose you for tonight. I didn't want to get off schedule. I've been very much looking forward to our interview here together, our chance to spend some time together. So, pardon me?
Is the lighting all right here?
I need to get some volume for your... you want to speak a little bit? I'm going to bring you up in volume-wise.
Okay, I put my volume up now. Is that better?
That's better, because I wasn't really getting any real volume with you, and we definitely want our folks to be able to hear you.
Okay.
So we got a big night planned. We got a lot of things we're going to talk about. Let's talk a bit about where would you like to start? Would you like to start with the accident? You want to tell us a little bit about your life before?
Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of planning to do, because it all leads up to
Exactly.
Spiritual enlightenment. Basically, long story short, you've read the book anyway. I was an immigrant from...
well, I have, but our guests haven't.
Yeah, okay. I was an immigrant from the UK, and within a year of being in Toronto, Canada, I was able to open a Merle Norman cosmetic studio, and fly off to Hollywood and makeup artists showing us, how to do makeup and everything else.
Well, before you go any further, let's talk a little bit about Merle Norman, because there's going to be a lot of people out there younger than you and I who aren't really going to necessarily know that name. But think of somebody famous in the cosmetic industry, Mary Kay, something like that,
Yeah.
and you'll have an idea of the kind of thing that Jessica is going to be talking about.
These are studio franchises, and they're all over America and all over Canada.
Right.
One goes and gets trained in Hollywood, where the head office is, and learns all the tricks of the trade, right? It was a great time. I was kind of on cloud nine, you could say, and felt like I was a little bit of an actress again, because as you know, I was a child professional actress and Irish dancer as
Well,
a child.
your family were in show business, weren't they? Your
Yes,
mom and dad?
my dad, Gordy Taylor, trumpet, and
Right.
yeah, yeah, we had a traveling variety show. So, but then I had my studio. Unfortunately, I only had it for 3 months when I was accompanied by a sales representative, went to an establishment that was unknown to me. I had not been there before. So there was, it was around a little back alley entrance in the dark, and I was assuming I was on ground level, and the door was open. I thought I was on ground level because I was looking at a picture window to my right of the door.
How high up were you?
Well, I was on ground level at this stage. Yeah,
Okay.
I was on ground level, and there was a picture window, lit up to the right of the door. So I assumed that I was on ground level when I walked in to the
Right.
premises. But unfortunately, it had taken me to the back door, or a side door. I've never known which it was, and opened the door, and it was just sheer pitch darkness. And the poor fella never cautioned me that there were like 15 steps straight down and a steel-plated door at the bottom. So I went head first.
Wow.
Literally, that was yeah, that was it. Uh, so that was the end of that career.
Well, there was kind of a. Let's talk a little bit about the fall and what happened for you there, Jessica. I mean, talk a little bit about. I guess his name was Gino, the fellow that took you there.
Yeah. Well, I changed his name because I didn't think it was
Right.
the thing to do. I actually have felt sorry for that man all my life since then.
Is that right? It must have been a horrible thing for him to have.
For him, to see
Right.
me lying at the bottom of the stairs, my head struck, a big slash in my head and the right side, and my hip injured and curled up in a little ball at the bottom of the stairs.
And
So
then he actually moved you too, did he not?
the poor fella, he did.
Right.
The poor fella. Yeah, he did.
Which that in and of itself can cause some pretty serious
Yeah,
damage beyond the fall, can it?
yeah.
Wow.
He probably was in a terrible state of shock, and he had to open that door to get into the illegal business in the basement. By the way, this led to the longest civil court case of its time in 1978.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What was the illegal business? Nothing like drugs like we have today.
You know what? It's actually comical. It's sad, but it's comical at the same time. There was a hairdressing establishment owned by the man, whatever I called him in the book.
Uh huh.
And he was conducting an illegal business in the basement. And we don't know what he had, but we know he had some wigs, supplies, and things like that.
I got you.
So this came up in court. I mean, the drama was absolutely, as everybody says, fit for a film. With my lawyer sort of, going up to him with a letter and saying, "Would you kindly read this?" When he denied owning the
Right.
basement. "Would you kindly read this to the court?" And that's where he had to actually read that there was a letter from the owner of the residence, the premises that he was renting,
Right.
telling him to kindly cease running the business.
Right. I read that in your book. Well, before all that though, that's quite a ways down the road before you actually got to court with this thing, which was a tough experience. So you had a near death kind of white light experience, did you not? That was pretty early on, wasn't it?
Yes, that was right at the hospital.
Tell us a bit about that. That's pretty interesting.
Well, some amazing things actually happened in that hospital, and I still can remember. It's 40 years ago or whatever. The white light didn't amaze me because I've done a lot of research and study on it, and I
Right.
understand it. But I felt it was obviously a near death. Even the nurses, staff said to people, to friends coming in to see me, it was touch and go. She'd only just pull through, that kind of thing.
Right.
But there was the strange things that happened was my fear. Once I came to weeks later, and the curtains were torn from around me. They keep you hidden behind the curtains.
Right.
The sound of those curtains, to this day I can remember. It was like a rebirth, literally being born into the world and looking at this face of this complete stranger, not even comprehending, I think, what a human being was. That's all I can say. It was like a complete rebirth, like a baby.
How had you been out? In other words, were you in a coma, or had you
Yes,
been?
let me coma for a couple of weeks, yeah.
So you know you're everything is great. You're doing real normal, and then you wake up in the hospital with this terrible.
And then I see this strange face and a little slap to my face, not hard, just probably to try and get me, motivated.
Right.
And get my brain functioning again, what was left of it. And then the screeching sounds of the curtain, that's really, really very vivid in my head. And also watching, there were elderly people in the ward around me.
Uh-huh.
They scared the dickens out of me. Now, when I was a nurse at one time, and I deliberately nursed the senior citizens because that was my favorite ward to work in.
Right.
And here I am now with, petrified of elderly people. And this remained for several years.
Wow. So you had a complete emotional change
It's
in this.
unbelievable. Nobody has been able to give an answer to that as to what the heck it was all about.
Uh-huh.
But a fear of elderly, and then, of course, the trauma as well of the EEGs and everything that they give you, and they're finding total confusion. But what fascinated me was that they found that the theta was irregular. Now, the theta, I have discovered through research, is predominant in people in a very spiritual nature, people doing manifestation, people doing spoon bending and all that kind of thing. So that fascinated me too, because I do believe, without any doubt, I went on another dimension.
Well, it changed everything. It changed everything for you, didn't it?
Yes, I went on another dimension.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not just, there's so much, as you know, it's like 260
Yeah,
pages.
yeah, and it's let me just say one thing to our listeners, our viewers. If you get a chance to read this book, it'll just captivate you and keep you. It's a page turner. So be sure and pick it up. Where can they actually order that, Jessica?
Well, it's on Amazon. You see, because I had a publisher in America, and unfortunately they went bankrupt before they got my book out.
Oh boy.
So what I did was I thought, oh, to heck with this, looking for a publisher now. Here I'm in Canada. I'll just self-publish, because
Right.
I self-published an earlier book called Journey Back in Ireland, which sold 3,000 copies literally overnight.
Right.
And got 4 major television shows, into 30 newspapers and everything else. But, and I thought, as I had a distributor in Ireland, I'd have a distributor here in Canada as well, self-publishing. No.
Everything changes, doesn't it?
Yep, the distributors don't want to know self-publishing here.
So they can buy this at Amazon.
So they can get it on Amazon, or if they're in
How
my
about your website?
they can get it in my local bookshop.
Okay, all right. And your website, can they buy it there?
Yes, they can go onto the website.
Tell us the web address.
Yeah, it's www.jessicaetaylor.org.
Great. So take a chance, go over and pick up a copy of this book. I guarantee you it's just a riveting kind of a story. So
Spans 3 countries,
right. How long were you in the hospital with this, Jessica?
I was only in the hospital for a couple of weeks. Yeah, that was one of the tragedies as well. Unfortunately, we were new immigrants, my husband and I, and we didn't have insurance. So I literally had to...
It's the way it is with hospitals. If you don't, you have to have
There
the...
was no further care at home. In those days, they kind of said, just come back in 6 months and that kind of thing. And
Right.
when I did, I overheard the doctor saying, asking another doctor, he seemed to be confused about my state. And he was talking to another doctor and said, blah, 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 feet on the desk, and I'm sitting there like a zombie, but aware of everything that was going on at the same time. And then he said, well, if that doesn't work, we'll have to drain. So, of course, immediately I thought my head was going to be drained, so what do? Get on a plane, take my $2, and off I go to my mother in England.
Oh, you just left?
So England is in the story as well.
Right, right,
as you know.
right.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about the changes that really happened for you and the you know there were some real dire things happened as far as your abilities and how you lived your life from that point. What tell us a little bit about that.
It was very difficult. It is difficult for everyone who has head and brain injury. It's very difficult. Everything in life is more difficult for us than it is just for the average person. Everything. And I'm talking about even driving your car and finding your way somewhere. You
Uh-huh.
know, writing the book was a tremendous effort. It took me years. But I am a strong-willed, determined person, and I think that's what saved me as well. Because, as you know from the book, I was quite suicidal at times. And I stayed on. I stayed on. I had children. And that's one of the things that in my, my campaign is the most important thing for me. And that's why I wrote the book.
Right.
My book isn't just a book. My book is part of my campaign. And my campaign is the most important thing in the world to me. That I can, shout from the rooftops about what's happening. There's not enough rehabilitation for head-injured people. The statistics around the world are frightening, as you saw in the book.
Oh, the numbers, I just had no idea that there were that
Yeah.
kind of numbers that
Yeah, and
happened.
costing in the U.S. $48 billion a year. And now we have all the soldiers in the wars as well, getting head injured, masses of them, 20%, I think, of the soldiers in both wars. And there are things that, I want to, in my campaign, I'm emphatic about getting to stop using the words brain damaged. How dare they? We are not damaged goods. That's based on medical ignorance from years ago. We're brain injured people, not brain damaged.
Well, there is quite I hadn't thought about that,
There's a
Jessica,
big-
but there is quite a difference there, isn't there?
Yeah, you don't say you damaged your arm or damaged your leg.
Right, you're injured, huh?
Why would say the brain? Because this was the thought from years and years back.
Right.
That, you were damaged goods, and I've no time for these words, and using the word vegetable as well.
Well, actually, since then we found that the brain really does some pretty amazing things. I mean, there are people walking around today with really functioning on with a half a brain, and they're okay.
Yes.
Because the brain has this amazing capability of restoration. It's very powerful.
Yes.
You also got kind of hooked on prescription drugs, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, I did. Uppers, downers, and barbiturates. Yeah.
And how did you listen? I know a bit about people who get caught and are addicted to prescription drugs, and they can be very, very difficult to stop. Did you have how was that for you? Did you have to seek some outside help, or you just kind of went cold?
I did go to actually a lovely East Indian doctor alternative doctor. She was in Toronto,
Uh-huh.
and she wanted me to go to, one of these drug rehab places.
Right.
And I said, no, I am sorry, I'm not going to mix with those poor souls. And I saw the snakes going up the wall and everything else, like you would off Valium and everything else, and I just pulled through it.
Right.
I made myself, I willed myself. Because, I believe we talk about the brain a lot, but it's the power of the mind, George, as far as I'm concerned, that got me, as well as the lovely people that came into my life, that John and Judy Hendricks becoming my father and mother figure, all these jazz musicians in London when I went there, supporting me and helping me. I believe it's the power of the mind more than anything else, and that's why I've studied a lot of mind power.
Well, it's pretty easy to get the brain and the mind connected because they just appear so connected in our consciousness. We think and we talk, but they're not, are they?
Yeah, no.
No, they're two different things. The mind uses the brain, as I understand it. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The brain's a computer, isn't it?
Exactly.
When you have a computer, something has to control it, right? Something has to. So I believe it's the same with the brain.
Well, that's one of the big challenges for us. That's a big part of awakening. And becoming conscious of your life is is to realize that, hey, the brain isn't in control. It shouldn't be in control. It is. It shouldn't be in control, and
No.
somebody has to
Right.
be the captain of that. Because the brain really is just, it's kind of like a big giant spreadsheet, isn't it?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah.
What if this? What if that? This, and it just goes on. And you think about it, and that you watch your mind for a while. You realize that's what's going on.
Yeah.
So is that what? Awakening consciously happens in an awful lot of ways. It's like in the '60s there were a lot of folks that LSD and drugs that like changed our perception, so we see differently. Your accident really changed the perception, and I wonder if drugs didn't play a little part in there too because of the prescription stuff that you were involved with. But anyway, your consciousness did change. What did you do
Yeah.
to stimulate your brain to get yourself back on track? You you, you got in.
That was,
In other words, the dormant neurons. You did some intensive research into
yes.
theology. Is that what you think was your
Yeah.
saving
I
grace?
actually, it started in the Isle of Wight. Don't ask me the year. I just can't remember. So many years.
Tell us
back.
where is the Isle of Wight?
Year, wasn't it?
Where is the Isle of Wight?
Isle of Wight is the very south of England.
Uh huh.
The tiny little island, beautiful little island. Yeah. And actually, how it all started was somebody befriended me. I was very, very poor, and I couldn't afford to heat the little bedsit that I had. But I did have a lovely view of the ocean, my favorite view. And he said, "Why don't you go to the library?" And okay, I said, "All right." He said, "What will I do there?" "I'll do some research." And okay, so I did. So I asked the girl at the the assistant there, "Can you show me where the research room is?" And so she said, "Okay." We're walking along, and she said, "What do you want to research?" And it just came from my mouth. I didn't think what it was going to say. I just said, "God."
Huh.
And
So you hadn't been thinking about that. That just came from your.
no,
What do you think? That came from your higher self, or
yeah, I do believe that.
right?
Yeah, absolutely, I do believe that. And then the books just fell out of the literally. I mean, I was led right to each respective book, and guess what they were? Vatican encyclopedias.
Believe me, I understand being led. I go into a bookstore and they kind of like fall on my foot.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's meant to happen. It's all meant to be. And these Vatican books gave me such information that nothing could stop me. I kept on researching for 14 whole
Well, when you say Vatican books, give us an idea what you're talking about. What?
So they're just big encyclopedias from the Vatican
Okay.
to these libraries, but apparently they were taken out of a lot of libraries. But I think they must have forgotten this tiny little island, you know?
Right.
And I mean, I looked at the first words were, I thought, I wonder what heaven and hell mean. And so, again, you'll get the etymology of words from these encyclopedias.
Right.
And heaven and hell was upper and lower air.
Right.
You know, and then I looked up devil and Satan, and they were enemy and slanderer, you know, and then that started it off. Nothing would stop me then. Nothing would stop me. And of course I delved right into reincarnation.
So the word theology. Let's talk about that for a minute. What?
Theology and theurgy. Don't ever forget theurgy.
Right.
They went hand in hand in ancient times. Theology was talking about the Godhead. Theurgy was acting on the forces of the Godhead.
Right.
So that's hands-on healing, boom bending, you name it.
So
The Palestinian banned that, by the way. Banned the use of theurgy.
Oh, really? They banned the word?
Yes, they banned people doing it. They banned. Well, he wrote curses, didn't he? So that people would not believe in reincarnation.
Who? I didn't catch who you said did this.
J. Emperor Justinian.
Right.
Yeah, Vatican V something. But yeah, so that's why people went underground. You know, the Essenes, the Gnostics, the Gnostic Christians, and they hid their scrolls. And of course, you know, they've been found now, and they're in book form. You can buy Gnostic books, and you can buy the Essene scrolls.
Absolutely. Well, they had to go into hiding because they were going to be sought out and murdered, and all their
Mm.
books were going to be burned, and it was
Yeah,
quite
that
a
did happen, didn't it, over a period of time?
yeah.
No, but I
And
mean, what was fascinating in these books is they were subject matters, theocracy, how you communicate with the Godhead on a one-to-one that we can without a priest. That was from a Vatican book. The words psychokinesis, mental powers, all this
see,
stuff.
all those things you're talking about were really used and talked about by the mystics of that time, because the Essenes were
Yes,
actually they were mystics.
yes,
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Dr. Carl Jung was quite a mystic himself. He actually
yes,
wrote a mystical tract under a pen name back in the 30s. And he bought a codex from the Nagamati find that they call the Jung codex at this point, which was one of the codices they found in the jars. So he was
yes.
very much into that. So when you say theomancy, is that how is this pronounced? Theomancy?
Theomancy.
Theomancy. Okay,
Theocracy is how we communicate with the Godhead.
right. Because I hadn't the
And theurgy
theomancy.
is the theology and theurgy were, practiced hand in hand.
So
Theurgy,
theomancy is divination, a form of
that,
divination. Is that right?
yes, 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 yes. Well, the curses that Justinian put out were called anathema. I have a list of them.
Right.
I have a list of the curses, which will go into my thesis, Jewels in the Mud, which I'm currently writing. Uh,
That's your next work, right? The
and
Jewels in the
yeah,
Mud.
uh,
And you're
yeah.
gonna take your thesis and publish it as a book, I would suspect.
I hope so. I
Hope
hope
to.
a publisher will. I would rather get a seasoned publisher, a conventional publisher to pick up my work because I can't get my book into the shops around the world until that happens.
Well, you write well enough where I think
Agent, if there's anyone out there.
you write well enough, Jessica, where I think that's a good possibility for you for sure. So
Yeah.
so tell me, like I know you've studied a lot of this, but do you do any divining yourself, or where are you at with that?
Yeah, mostly meditation.
Uh huh.
I believe in that everybody should do, and
Well,
especially injured people. Um,
well, I think we all should. I think we
very
all.
important.
I think we all should, Jessica. I think we're all injured and we don't realize it.
Yes,
Absolutely, and meditation is huge in my life. It's been a
yes,
big part of
yes.
it.
It's very important. We have to still the mind, and head injured people particularly, because all of the people that have come to me and still turn to me as a result of my book and campaign work and that, they have the same problem. Just the mind just rambles and rambles and rambles, and it needs to be kept still. But good things are coming, from my book too. 3 lives have been saved, thank God.
Well,
3
that's what I saw. They were
Yeah,
on the verge of suicide, read your book, and spent a
yeah,
little time talking with you, and changed their whole life around.
yeah. Thank heavens for that. But I'd rather save more. But one day, it'll happen. It all takes time. It all takes time.
Right. So you also when you looked up words, did you go back to the concordance and back into the original Greek and Hebrew to
Yes,
find out
yes.
what they?
I even interviewed a canon in Ireland who was leaving the church, and we had some great discussions
Uh huh.
about what happens at the Vatican. You know that they have a word for reincarnation at the Vatican?
I'm sure they do.
Metempsychosis.
What is it?
Metempsychosis. Yeah.
Metapsychosis.
Metem. MET.
Metum. And what does metum mean?
Well, metapsychosis is literally, that's their word, so I suppose it's beyond.
Is it META? Is that how it's spelled? Meta.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
That just means the higher.
yeah.
Right.
On psychosis, psychology kind of thing, I suppose. Metempsychosis.
So they're calling it a form of insanity. Is that what?
I don't know. I haven't investigated that Chosis.
Well, when you, listen, if you read the scriptures, if you read the Bible, you have to know that reincarnation was part of their life back then. It wasn't.
Very much
They didn't
so.
use the word, but it was going on. It was happening.
But the modern Bibles are not as clear as the Vulgate. The Vulgate was 400 AD,
Right,
and it was compiled by St. Jerome.
right.
Now, that has got 52 chapters called Ecclesiasticus that were removed from modern Bibles. So people should get the Vulgate if they want to study the Bible.
Well, part of the problem with the Bible is that it really, as I see it, when I look at it, what I see is you had the Roman Empire during this time, and in 300 A.D. is when the Bible came into being,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and Constantine was emperor at that point and was having difficulty controlling the people, and that was the Roman Empire's whole thing was to control and tax, so that
Yes.
and so he called the Council of Nicaea, where they brought the various books in, and he put a lid on it, and that was it. And the books you're talking about were banned from the Bible, really.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
You know,
And that's,
part
of course, where Justinian really had a big part in it. The Emperor Justinian and his wife Theodora.
Absolutely. Well, it went back long before, but if you go back in you explore the birth of Jesus, and like in the date and so forth, what you find is that there were myths that the exact same sequence of events happened. The wise men, the star, the whole works, and it has this look that Constantine borrowed that in order to get. And what's interesting is, so we went from the Roman Empire to the Roman Catholic Church,
Yes.
which was I don't mean to insult anybody who's in the Roman Catholic Church these days, but certainly it was a very powerful time back then.
Oh, they had tremendous power. They've had for centuries and centuries tremendous power. I was brought up Protestant in a Roman Catholic country in the south of Ireland, but the Roman Catholics became my closest friends. We today, thank goodness, it's a lot better now because was back in Ireland not too many years ago, and they're merging. They're going to each other's churches, and that it's a much nicer
Right.
feeling altogether about the whole thing. But the Roman emperors did start all that, and people believed in the goddess Estra, and then that was changed to Easter because the Romans wanted to win over the pagans.
Exactly.
They wanted to set up their army, a big, gigantic army, which they did.
Right.
And so things like that were taken. Even Christmas was Christ's Mass.
Right, which was the birth. Well, here's what I see as the challenge or difficulty with this. When we're given the Bible, or at least I was given the Bible and told this is the only Word of God, and if and there's plenty in there that in the Bible that you can use to back that up and continue propagating that whole idea. But if you do what you did, if you take a little time to go back and to find out how the Bible came into being,
Yes.
check the history, then things just don't add up. Things begin to change, don't they?
Yes. Yes.
You did some. You said you looked up Jesus' words about being able to move mountains, and what did they mean by that, and what you discovered?
Well, I just felt that was an analogy. That again, going back to the power of the mind.
Right.
He was telling us, how powerful our minds were. I think it's that simple. I think a lot of it is simplicity. Actually, it's all quite simple. It was John Hendricks who became a father figure of mine. John Hendricks of the group Lambda Lambert Hendrickson Ross was one of the jazz people that helped me, him and his wife Judy. And he said, mankind has, what does he say? The quote in my book, actually. That spiritualism was destroyed by intellectualizing it. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely it does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, how about you did some work with mental powers too, didn't you? With psychokinesis and that kind of thing. Did you do anything with that yourself, or?
Well, I didn't, try spoon bending and levitating and all that sort of
Uh-huh.
thing. It was basically doing massive investigation, really investigating the whole. 14 years is a long time to do research for on this theology and its connection with the paranormal.
So, but I think like a lot of things happened for you in this process, Jessica. That I really want our viewers to really take away from this. One
Okay,
was that all this time that you were doing this, you were really you were like healing your brain and your mind.
Yes, I was stimulating dormant neurons
Right.
without knowing that that's what I did all those 14 years.
And so what you were really doing was creating new neural pathways
Yes,
for those that had been injured.
yes, exactly.
And so, you know, I don't think a lot of these kinds of things happen so much by accident as they might seem, Jessica. It's like, when I look at the period of time in my life when I started to really become conscious, I started the search that you were talking about, but I was in my late 30s when I had this whole transformation that began for me.
Great.
And one of the most important things, if not the most important thing in my life at that point, became my spiritual life. And I did much of what you talk about and what you did, and that's to go back and study and find out, like what really went on.
Yes, yes.
But I think what I believe is there is a consciousness awakening happening right now, age of
There it is.
Aquarius, if you will.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you part of what I'm amazed about with you. I know people who are. Can I talk about your age?
Yeah.
Okay.
Proud of it.
Jessica, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Jessica is 70 years old, and
72 in July.
72 now. Okay, so
I just
hey, listen, I
about-
was doing you, making you younger.
Yeah, I know.
So
Years old,
she's
sounds
72
rough.
years old, and take a look at what you're seeing here. You're looking at this beautiful woman on a webcam on an internet television show, who obviously is computer literate enough to be able to do what she's done. And think about the numbers of people that in that age bracket who just are shut down completely to this whole kind of thing. And
No. People say you should be walking the dog and having coffee with your neighbors, not killing yourself like this.
well, having read your story, I can't even imagine that happening for you, to be quite honest with you. It just doesn't even seem like a possibility. So I admire you. I admire like where you've come from and what you're doing and what you've written and your cause for those people who have been brain injured. It's
That's
really
the most important thing, George. As I said, my book is just part of my campaign. I've had to reveal a lot of things. I mean, you've read about the sex and everything else in my story.
yes.
The court case and everything else, things that one would really rather keep to oneself. But I have got to let people see what it's like to have an injury to the brain.
Well, let's talk just a minute about exactly that when you talked about the sex thing, and only from the point before the injury you were pretty shy, were you not?
Yes.
Pretty inhibited,
Yes.
and after that, what happened for you?
Oh, it was great fun. And then in the actual court scene, I call it court scene because I'm always seeing this as a film. um, my neurologist just literally said, well, you know what? She became emancipated.
And she's a bad girl, right?
Inhibitions were gone.
Right.
This is another thing that happens to a lot of head injured people. There's one patient in Ireland who decided he was an attorney, a great job, everything else, had a head injury, and his wife told me he just keeps running around the garden with no clothes on.
That must be pretty interesting for the neighbors, or uninteresting, depending on how you look at that.
That's fun about that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you really had to go on a search for who you really were. Am I
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes, because I went, as you know, when I went, I mean, I'm all over the place. I'm in England and I'm in Scotland and I'm in Ireland, everywhere. But when I went back to Canada at one particular time, I decided to get into another cosmetic business, thinking I'll find myself if I go back. But I didn't want to go back to Merle Norman because I thought it would be too, I need a word, emotional, you know, because it would bring it back everything that I was in. So I went into Carl Baker Visage cosmetic studio, and I wasn't there hardly any length of time where I realized this is not me, this is not who I am. I had to get out. And I found myself counseling people and counseling, you know, young people would come in and the brink of suicide, and then I tell them my story and they'd say, oh my God, I feel great now. You know, after listening to what happened to you. And then people came into my life on a spiritual dimension as well. Beautiful people came and, you know, this was before I started the gigantic research, you know, and then
Right.
they would, well, no, it was in the middle, sorry, it was in the middle. I had done some first previously. And they would, you know, tell me what I needed to know, you know. So like-minded people then started coming into my life, and that helped.
Absolutely. That just seems to happen when you get on that spiritual path, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, yes. I know now. All my friends are in the, you know, healers and psychics and you name it. It's wonderful.
So we talked a bit earlier, we touched briefly on the idea of reincarnation. We just had a guest on who wrote a book called Your Soul's Plan, and the idea was that we decide the kind of life we're gonna live and what's gonna happen to us in before we're born. We actually have a plan. We pick our parents, you know, all kinds of things in order to be able to learn things that we need to learn in order to rise to a higher level in that other plane. Is that what you think has happened for you?
I do believe that, and I believe that, you know, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, I believe that this transition is kind of an amalgamation of the going on a better dimension. I don't like to say higher because I don't like to
Different anyhow, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But another dimension and with more knowledge and understanding of the universe and us and what it's all about. And again, that only came through those 14 years of research. But I know that it is a mission, that I'm on a mission. A lot of people refer to me as this person who is on a mission to, as one journalist wrote in Ireland, captain the plight of the head injured. And I believe that's my goal, that I have to do this.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that that's true, Jessica. But from this viewpoint, I see something else going on here too, and that is that, you know, the transformation that happened in you. You know, if I go back to your story when you're in a Merle Norman studio, your shop, and I mean that could have given you a nice life, and you could, but.
Yeah.
But as far as your spiritual life, as far as your soul, I wonder if you had stayed there, that maybe you would never have awakened, and if you hadn't awakened, maybe you would not have had the effect on people that you have had. Because as I read through your book, I see that you had an effect on a tremendous number of people, and are still having an effect. And
I agree.
yeah, and
I agree with that.
yeah, and I'm sure that all plays in. What's really interesting for me, and it's you know, I had this experience before starting to do the show, but now that I've started to do the show, the numbers of people really, really neat people that I get an opportunity to talk with, like yourself, who are out there putting out this idea of a transformation, a change, a true change here on Earth as being something that really can happen. You know, the more of us that begin to speak about that and connect up, there's real power in that. There's real
Yes.
power in changing people.
Yes.
You know, and if you look at business, they'll tell you. I was in the real estate business, and one of the sayings is that 80% of what gets sold by 20% of the people. And I believe that it's the same way in spiritual matters. I don't think we need to have 89. I don't think we have to have 100% of the people. I think 10 or 20% of the people can create this huge shift that we're talking about. And I just talk with people all the time who are consciously participating in that. And you're one of my new friends that are doing that. I can't tell you how happy I am to be a part of all that with you.
Well, it is wonderful that your show is doing this, and there are other shows.
Yes, there are.
Stations and Harmonic Utopia, and God bless her, Shirley MacLaine out in the limb. She started it all, I think. I think this is creating that higher dimension for people, that they're becoming much more aware of spirituality, what it's all about.
Absolutely, and Harmonic Utopias. We had those folks on as a guest. They're just some really, really nice people. I really enjoyed my talk with them. So I'll tell you what, with all the trouble we had, Jessica, I didn't think we were going to get a chance to have this conversation, but I'm glad we were able to iron out the difficulties. We're kind of running down time-wise here, and what I'd like to do is offer you an opportunity to just talk about whatever you might like to say that we've missed here somehow or other. When I see your book, it's a pretty good sized book, and it's fairly small print, so there's just a lot in here, and I'm sure we missed something. Is there anything that you'd like to add to where we're at?
You mean in the contents of the story?
No, just in your life, and anything you'd like to talk about at all on this show before we close out.
Well, I'm grateful to two policemen for saving my life. That's in the book. Probably could have been murdered one night with one of the sad things that happens to a head injured person is you become vulnerable and gullible. And so I have two members of the police force in my family, so I know what kind of work they do.
Well, you had all that going for you, but I got an idea that you were also being looked after.
Yes.
And taken care of and guided in ways that we're not always aware of, aren't we? Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your patience and your understanding with our technical problems. I've totally enjoyed my time with you. I'm sure our viewers have enjoyed you. And I will look forward to having you on another time. And
well, I'll be in Florida in Ponte Verde Beach sometime next month.
You contact me. We'll have to have a cup of coffee.
Yeah, have a chat.
Okay,
yeah.
Sounds great. You have a good night now.
Thanks so much, and thanks to anybody listening in and watching.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye, dear.
Well, we've come to the end here of another night. I hope that you enjoyed our conversation with Jessica. She is a super lady, and I'm a little sad that we didn't really. I don't think we got what I wanted to get in this interview of the strength and power of this lady and what she went through. It's like, she told us some things about it, but I'll tell you what, it was a much more powerful event for her, and where she's come to since that point, she just has an awful lot to offer the world. So with that, we are going to close our show out, and don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.